It's like direct too. Like, hey.
It's just not right. Give me a second. What do you do exactly?
That's a stop. And now it's pause.
So I need to.
Now it's recording.
Yeah.
You're recording all of it.
Thank you. I'm glad you were around.
Got it. Yeah.
Press the gun.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi guys. So I'm Lucy, Margot, Roberta, and Brittany.
You got it taken care of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And our group chose to do Chinese culture and kind of with American Chinese culture, but Chinese culture in general too. Because also, according to a survey in 2013, there are over 72,000 residents in the Houston area that identify as being Chinese, like either ethnically or culturally. So it is a culture that we are going to interact with probably on a daily basis at some point in our careers. So where is China? China is really close to a lot of the countries that a lot of us have been presenting on in this class. There are also, there's 14 countries around the border, and then you have the Pacific Ocean on the other side. And you can go on to the next one. So the population of China is approximately 1.35 billion people, which compared to the US, which is 316 million approximately, that's the size of China like over the US. So it's not much bigger than the US, but with that many more people in that confined space, the ratio of people to like square mile is way higher than it would be here. Also, the Communist Party is the party that controls it's a communist form of government there. So they control like the state, the military, media, all of that. And the common language is Mandarin, but there are different dialects throughout China also. So it's different between like the north and the south, which with the accents people use and how people talk and there's slight differentiation like words that they use. But a lot of them are also fluent in English because of business and the way the world is just, it seems to be shrinking with how much we all interact with each other. So while Mandarin is the main language, a lot of them still speak English. As far as religion, it's technically atheist according to the government and what they identify as a country, but they recognize 5 official religions within the borders, which are Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And then as far as the class system, it's kind of unofficial that you have like the political leaders and then the peasant masses, but it's not an official class system like it may have been in the past in certain points of their history. So it's one of the longest recorded civilizations in the world. It goes back to, the written recording goes back to the Shang dynasty, which we have a slide about all the different dynasties. But as far as recording civilization, it goes back to 17th century BCE, and there's still some record of the dynasties before them, but as far as written record, that's when it all begins. And so the tradition, the etiquette is all very deeply rooted within their country. And also because of the way the different dynasties have formed over time, there is a difference between north and south, and also just because of regionally and how big the country is also. Because I was reading about it that the people in the north are actually taller than people in the south. I thought that was really, really interesting based on the people that they were descendants of. So the north is more like Mongols, from what I understood. So they have different facial features, they're taller. And also as far as personalities, people from the north tend to be a little more blunt and loud, where people in the south are more reserved. And also because the north has a colder climate and the south is warmer, the south is people eat a lot more rice, or like the north eats more noodles. So while they have a lot of the same traditions and etiquettes and everything, from how deeply rooted their culture is, like going back that far, there are differences between like the north and the south. So, and that's going back, yeah.
So, clothing. So China has always kind of led the world in like kind of clothing, and because in really ancient times, other countries dressed in like furs and stuff to protect themselves, but China has dressed in silk for a really long time. And that's been up to just about 40 to 50 years ago when they kind of started to change. They did silk tunics that just varied in length just based on the weather. And then in the 1970s, the Communist Party kind of pulled back and started allowing people to wear whatever they wanted. So that's kind of when you see the Western influences start coming in, even though they continue to kind of wear their symbols, and silk is still like a big thing. So some of the different tunics that are available, the yellow one up above is kind of the emperor's. It's always yellow and it has dragons, and it's for like really high functions, and only the emperor gets to wear it, like even the color and the dragons, and it's illegal to like sell it or to make it if you don't have like express permission. And it changed, like the different styles change with every dynasty, because you have new rulers that come in and kind of start setting different rules. The historical dresses that you have, the hanfu, which is kind of what you typically think about. It's like the 2-piece or 3-piece dress that has like the floating sleeves and stuff. And you can like, depending on like formality, you can put more layers on or less, and you can change that look. And then the gat sensu, which is both these two pictures, is equivalent to like the Western suit. It's like her more formal wear. It's not typically worn there now because they're starting to adopt more Western practices, but it's still worn by high officials when they have like political functions and stuff. They dress up in this. And then the cheongsam, that's this. It's the more fitting dresses that they're wearing, which is like to festivals and stuff, and that's typically what people think of too. That was started by women for more like women's rights movements back earlier, because it's not as flowy. So food, rice is the main staple in China. It's grown through the entire country, where wheat is only grown more in the north, so rice is grown all over. When people come over, they prefer to take them out rather than cook for them to kind of give them more formality and stuff, but guests drop by all the time, so you always have to be ready to serve someone. Soup is served with every meal, and it's very different than the Western. It's actually the last course versus like the first course, which is kind of what we do. And tea is also the most common beverage, and they drink it totally black in China. They don't really add cream or sugar. Some of their cooking instruments, the wok, is little oil and really high heat, so it cooks things fast, so it's very efficient. And then the bamboo steamers, they line with cabbage leaves, and it really holds in the moisture. Meat is very expensive in China, so even though they're not like opposed to eating it, it is less common to find, so that's why rice, dumplings, and all that are a lot more common. And then the whole cooking shows a reflection on family history due to like natural disasters and war. People found how to use whatever they could find, so that's why they eat like chicken's head and feet and dog meat, because it's whatever they can find they eat, and that's common in that. And since we're on the subject of food, we're just going to pass out food right now. So what we made are green onion pancakes. So these are more of a snack food, and they're used in the they're bought in the marketplace and just in like festivals and stuff. And you can dip it in the soy sauce.
And we did double check. Technically, they do not use chopsticks on these, because we were curious. So we asked people, and so it's not like it's kind of a misconception among Westerners that Chinese people use chopsticks for everything. That's not exactly true. They do use them for things like rice and things like that we probably wouldn't. But something like this is considered kind of like a fun food for them, and it's more like a finger food type dish.
Is it supposed to be eaten with soy sauce, or is it?
Yeah, people do eat it with soy sauce, but you don't have to.
And then, sometimes it's plain, but most of the time there is a sauce that you dip in.
Marco, this isn't bad.
Did everybody get one? Miss anybody?
Better than my scrambled egg.
Anybody want more soy sauce? We have more.
Is it just peppers and mushrooms?
Yeah, so it's flour and hot water, and then you put roll it out in different shapes to get the flakiness, and you put green onions in it, and then you kind of fold it up, and then you fry it, and then that's it. So it's not a lot of ingredients, really easy to make.
It was described to us as like a street food. Like it's kind of something like if you're walking around the market or something, you just kind of find in China at most street food places.
Okay, so ceremonies are really big in China. So the Chinese Spring Festival is the largest ceremony they have. It spans 15 days, and it celebrates the Lunar New Year, which changes every year. So it ranges between January 21st and February 20th. And so this day is when like the Chinese zodiac sign changes, which there's 12 different animals. So it cycles every 12 years, which is one cycle, and then every 60 years is like a big cycle. It originated in the Shang Dynasty as well, so it originated it was like 4,000, really long time ago. And then the like kind of folk tale that like, goes with it is that there's a monster Nian which eats all the children and livestock. And it's scared of loud noise and the color red, which is good luck in China. So they decorate all their houses with the color red, and they set off a lot of fireworks to scare it away. And it's the largest selling fireworks in all the world on this day. It also has a really big root in family. All families supposed to get together and have a huge reunion, and it's the largest migration of people in the world. 1 billion people travel during this week to meet each other. There's daily celebrations during these 15 days that you're supposed to adhere to. A lot of them being like seeing your family on specific days and times. And it's so important that students get 1 month off of school and employers get 1 week off of school to celebrate this. And then there's some like taboos and traditions that you have to follow during the Chinese Spring Festival. So you always have to clean your whole house. So this is like the spring cleaning time. Your whole house is clean, and then you have to buy new clothes for the festival. And then you're not allowed to use bad words like death, broken, ghost, illness, because it's bad luck. If you break objects, you're apart from your family for the next year. You're not allowed to sweep because you're sweeping away good luck. You're not allowed to lend or borrow because it means you'll have financial loss. You can't eat porridge because it will cause poverty. And then the Lantern Festival goes along with the Spring Festival. It's the last day, and it's when they light thousands of the lanterns and like lift them up into the sky. And it's the end of the Spring Festival. It occurs between February 5th and March 7th. And on this day, the Chinese taboos go away, so you can eat porridge and sweep again. You can take away your decorations at the end of this day. And this day is also the first full moon night of the year, so that's kind of celebrated at the same time. And the symbol of this is the return of spring, and it's the reunion of family again. So family is a huge, important aspect of this. But on this day, a lot of people can't see their family because like the 1 week off is over already. So most people have already gone home. This started in the Han Dynasty, so this started about 2,000 years after the Chinese Spring Festival did. And this started because the Emperor Kangxi was Buddhist, and he saw the monks do this every year, and part of their tradition. So he ordered everyone to do it, and it kind of became a huge tradition. So the Dragon Boat Festival is the last festival that we're going to talk about. It occurs on the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, so that occurs in the summertime. And it's very popular in the south because that's where it originated. And it's right here. It's a whole teamwork situation where you get in these boats that design like dragons, and you have to like race the other teams to a specific destination. And there's a huge legend that goes behind it. So it's to honor the poet Kuei Yan. And he is a huge poet. He's one of the most highly regarded poets in China. But the way he kind of became a poet, he was a minister at first, and the king like loved him. But then he was slandered by other ministers because he was doing such a good job, and they didn't like that. So the king had to exile him. And so he kind of just roamed around, and that's when he wrote his poetry about how much he loved China, about how he saw like all this corruption going on. And so he committed suicide in the river. And so people actually took boats out to him to try to save him, but they were too late. So they threw rice in the river, so like fish wouldn't eat his body. And so that's why you also eat rice dumplings on this day. And those are the celebrations.
So the role of family, family is very, very important. It's the most fundamental and important unit in Chinese culture. There is definitely a hierarchy that exists. What's interesting about this hierarchy is it's not the father at the top like you would think. It's actually the grandparents. So the grandfather is at the top, then the grandmother, then the father, the mother, and the children. One of the sources that we read was actually talking about how Western culture sees hierarchy as something that's very like scary and intimidating, but that a lot of the actions are things that we probably wouldn't even notice.
So this hierarchy, is it patriarchal? So the grandfather on top would be from the father's side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes from the father's side
Father's,
first.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, okay. So the hierarchy also translates into like your work setting. So like one example is if you have a business meeting, the people that are higher up are expected to sit farther away from the door. And if you're really high up, then you're expected to face farther away from the door and facing the door. So that's something that we wouldn't really pick up on unless it was pointed out to us. Another example is if you're at a banquet, the person, and you're walking in like a group of people, the person in the front is usually the one that's the highest up. So the first person that walks into the meeting, other Chinese people that are at the meeting will think that that person is leading the meeting. So that was interesting. It's just thought of more as etiquette than anything else. So child rearing focuses on obedience, social expectations, behavior, and emotional control. So we're going to talk about this later on, but we did choose Arnie Gray as our family member. So I just kind of wanted to point out that you can see how Arnie would have difficulties in this culture because he did have behavioral issues and wasn't really respectful of his elders and authority. So yeah, we'll go into that later. But complete harmony is also something that's really important because the Chinese culture is so interdependent in the family. If something is wrong with me, it doesn't just affect me, it affects my whole family and it affects the harmony of that family. So that's really important. And then there's the one-child policy, which was implemented from 1979 to 2015 and just recently transferred over to the two-child policy. So there were exceptions among that in the one-child policy when it was implemented. The extremely wealthy could pay this fine, but it was like really big and like ridiculous that you could only afford to have 2 children. Like it could be done, but you would have to pay a big, big fine. And then minorities also weren't expected to follow the one-child policy. There were some pros and cons. The government thought it was really effective for the economy and overpopulation, but socially it was not effective. There was a lot of mental health issues in women who either had to like abort their babies or abandon them. There was also this development of little emperor syndrome, which was because they were only allowed to have one child. That child was really spoiled, basically. They were overindulged, overweight. There was like a huge overweight problem, laziness, and like entitlement. They noticed that pattern of the children. So that was one thing. And then also there was a lot of pressure. The children had a lot of pressure placed on them because, you know, your parents have all these goals that they want to achieve. And when you only are able to have one child, it's like all that is forced onto that one child's shoulders. So, yeah. And then the ancestors, they do honor their ancestors. They have small altars. They also use incense, burn incense. They eat special foods during special occasions. And then there's 2 festivals that we're going to talk about. So there's the Kunming Festival, which is known as Tomb Sweeping Day. And this is basically just a day where people will go out to their families' tombstones and tidy them up, put new flowers, take out things that are old, just make it look nicer. And then there's Ghost Month, which is from like late August to September. So this is different in that Ghost Month is honoring everyone that has passed on, so people that are your age and people that are younger than you and even older generations, whereas Kunming is pretty much exclusively just for older generations. And then in the Kunming Festival, that's when you go visit the tombstones of your loved ones, whereas in Ghost Month, it's believed that the spirits come to visit you. So yeah, that's a distinction. Next slide. So the importance of face is very, very, very important in Chinese culture. It's taken so much more seriously there. So to lose face means to lose the respect of others. So that represents a person's reputation and the feelings of prestige, and their face translates over into the workplace, the family, like among their friends and society at large. And then Confucianism, all Chinese are greatly influenced by Confucianism. There's one important aspect of it is that they focus on Confucianism, which is internal satisfaction. So kind of relating that back to OT and like how all our goals are trying to get that internal satisfaction from our clients. So we want clients to be happy with what they can do and find ways to do what they want to do. So that's something that Confucianism really tries to focus on. They also advocate that individuals put group needs above personal needs. So there's an extremely strong sense of community. One of the sources said that it's not uncommon to have like these committees in either like apartment complexes or like large building neighborhoods, and these committees are either volunteers or residents that are retired or housewives, and they just address the residents' like family or environmental issues. Anything that they have, you can go to this committee and they'll help you out. And then there's also this collectivism versus individualism. So in Western society, Western culture, we all want to be independent, and in OT too, we always want to be self-sufficient and able to do things on our own, which is pretty different from China. Like I talked about, they have that strong sense of community, so they are used to being interdependent and depending on other people. So we always hear like the client-centered approach throughout the program. This would be something that's Chinese people would find very confusing, and they might even be a little uncomfortable with it. They view healthcare providers as somebody that's authoritative, and they like kind of like a cut and dry method of this is your issue and this is what we're going to do to solve it. Whereas in Western culture, we want somebody who can understand us and wants to nurture us back to health and is, I guess, a little softer. So I guess that's just something to consider if you are dealing with somebody who's very traditional in their culture in regards to China. And then the yin and yang is also really important, these opposing forces of harmony and balance, and they find harmony between these energies.
Right, so however, Rachel touched on the importance of ancestors. So it is one of the traditional beliefs that there is an ancestral realm. So a lot of family members have to honor them, and they have the little like altars in their houses, small, just kind of like a little shrine to their ancestors to honor them and keep them in their hearts and their minds, and to honor them after death. And because it's believed that people live beyond the grave through their family that they leave behind. So that's why it's really important that people honor their ancestors. Also, the funerals are usually really elaborate. There's 9 funeral rites, which include like what you wear and the whole procession and announcing it to everybody. So basically, the wealthier you are, the more elaborate it is, and the more possessions that are buried with you for your time in the ancestral realm. And also, which I thought was very interesting compared to Western culture, where usually at funerals we all wear black. Over there, everyone wears white. So it's very traditional to all wear white to the wedding. And also, mourning, like audibly, loudly mourning at funerals is a representation of how like respected and loved that person was. So they believe that, some people believe that if there's not enough crying at the funeral, that the ancestors may be offended by it, or that it's not honoring their memory and then moving on to the ancestral realm. So at funerals, it's become a thing now that actresses that are out of work are hired as mourners. So I was watching some videos, and they have the full makeup, full outfits, and a lot of them have microphones too. And they get out there and they just cry as loud as they can, and they just wail, and they go on and on about this person that they may not have even known. And they encourage other people to cry loudly with them to honor this person that has been passed away. That's interesting.
So So for illness and medicine, since like the family focus is on being completely normal, like in China they want their children to be normal. You don't want to stand out, you don't want to be creative, you don't want to do anything outside like the norm. So illness is viewed as completely abnormal. And they believe qi is kind of their life force. So the idea is that whenever you're sick, that qi is interrupted, so that life force, something's going wrong. And they don't appreciate illness whatsoever. So they try and fix things. They believe that there's like a cure to every illness. They don't really want something that's ongoing, that's seen as negative. So they use a lot of things that Western cultures have even adopted more lately from what we've seen. Things like herbs, acupuncture, and massages are common. So Western medicine isn't exactly the first thing they turn to generally. So that's something to think about whenever we treat people. So disability is viewed as like very negative. So these babies are adorable. So I had to put them in there. But the thing is, the idea of thinking that children like this likely would stay in their home their entire lives. It's unlikely they would ever be educated. There's a 9-year education policy in China where you are, like, children are required to get 9 years worth of education, but it's not always enforced when it comes to children with any kind of illness or any type of abnormality in the parent's eyes. So there's about 17% of the people in China that live with a disability, and they mostly live in poverty. So they've developed discrimination laws, but they're not very effective because people, even though they've been implemented in China, the upper government doesn't really view them as important. A lot of them still hold the older views and the traditional views that if you're abnormal, you need to stay in the home because you might cause your family to lose face if you're outside the home, because it would be a negative view upon them. So the family generally takes on just a caretaker role instead of treating and being actively involved in them, like recovering. They just take it as, you know, my child has Down syndrome or my child has an intellectual disability, and they'll stay in the home and we'll just care for them. They don't care if they walk, they don't care if they learn, they don't care if they do things independently, it doesn't matter. It's the family's job to take care of them and keep them within the home. Okay, so mental health we decided was important to input in here because mental health has like been on a major rise in China and amongst Chinese culture, not just within China. So even in America, first generation immigrants from China are having really high mental health issues. And that can also be just because they've shifted to such a different culture, but they also get stigmas from their families because they start to westernize and their families don't appreciate that, especially when they go back to China. So that chart up on the top right kind of shows the increase in antipsychotics and antidepressants, and that's literally just in the last 10 years. Of course, it's 5 years old, or 7 years old now, but just in 10 years, that's how much it increased. So mental health is viewed as weak character. They believe that if you have a mental health issue, it could be because your mom was weak whenever she was pregnant, maybe she's too emotional, maybe, so like over here in Western culture, you know, we characterize pregnancy as being emotional and all that kind of stuff. In China, it's not believed that you should be that way. You need to take the emotions out of it. And whenever you get something such as mental health, the idea is that there's evil spirits or you're being punished by God, so you did something or your mother did something and that's what's causing you to have that illness. And they now have their first mental health law, which was in 2013, but a lot like the discrimination law, it's not as enforced just yet. Okay, so as far as addressing people with disabilities, the idea is that you really have to look at traditional medicine first. That's probably the most important factor. They're not going to go straight to putting their children on a medication like we would, or doing traditional routes. Therapy is actually a little more, probably more comfortable, I guess, than like medication and stuff even, but it's still a little difficult because we do view things as client-centered and we try to work with the client. And their idea is that you work with the parents, you work with the family. They don't believe in giving the client bad news, so if a patient is dying in the hospital and they don't know what's going on, maybe it was found that they had cancer, they will not tell the patient that. They'll tell the family, because the family believes that if you tell the patient that they have cancer, or you tell the child that they're sick, that it makes them worse. So they just let them kind of not know. They could die not knowing what's going on. So that's a little different approach that you'd probably have to keep the families more in the loop than you would here generally. So So there's like a high emotional self-control. So whereas therapists, we want them to kind of express how things are going, how they're doing. It may be a little more difficult, so you might have to be more sensitive to that, in that you're not going to directly ask, are you sad, are you this, because them telling you that, especially a first-generation Chinese American, might not be really forthcoming with that information. They might feel uncomfortable if you approach them too much about it.
So just kind of summarizing everything too, like I said earlier, there's high expectations placed on the children because they are only allowed to have 1 or 2 children. So they have great responsibility. Like Brittany talked about, there's the mandatory 9-year education. They have a 9-year system, which is elementary and middle school put together. And then there's also China's annual college entrance exam, which is similar to the SAT for us here, except when we're applying to colleges, they tell us we need recommendation letters and essays and extracurriculars, and we have all this extra stuff that we need. Whereas when people in China are applying for colleges, this is pretty much the only thing that matters. So if you don't do well on this exam, then you're not getting into college. So in the corner, that's parents actually seeing off their children to go take that exam. So it's a really, really big deal because that's, potentially could determine how their life.
We thought it was really funny because, like, here, like, that would be the equivalent of, like, you go to take your PSAT or SAT and you leave from the school on a school bus. Like, could you imagine, like, 500 parents sitting out there, like, cheering for you as you leave? So that's kind of their equivalent to doing that, but in China.
Yeah. Oh, and then, so culture is really important, and like Brittany said, you don't want any negative attention drawn to you. So here in the United States, we're encouraged to express ourselves. We're put in different sports, play different instruments, different extracurricular stuff. Whereas in China, they really want them to all, they're expected to perform at the same level. If they stand out in any way, it's considered as hindering the learning of other students. So they are forced to wear uniforms, they have to wear the same shoes, and they even have to have like a certain hairstyle. And then their behavior also has to be non-distracting. So if students are considered too distracting, they cannot attend school and they stay home. And so a lot of times the parent is forced to stay home to take care of the child, and that puts a lot of pressure on the parent. Yeah, and then so family meals are important. Like we talked about, Margot said how visitors are usually drop by unexpectedly. There's stigmas against people with mental disabilities, and there's those high responsibilities and expectations placed on children. So this is just like some highlights from Arnie's occupational profile, because that's who we chose. He's 18 years old, he has autism spectrum disorder. Daily life roles include brother, son, and first-generation Chinese American. He lives with his mother and 3 siblings in their ranch-style home in Endora. He's very dependent on his older brother in ADLs and IODLs, especially feeding and bathing. And his current baseline is that he finds it frustrating and difficult to use utensils when eating. And because he's so dependent on his brother Gilbert, if Gilbert is not present to assist him with feeding, he will not eat, and he won't attempt to eat by himself.
Okay, so with that, the reason that we chose, the occupation chosen is feeding for Arnie, because there is such a high value in that society of being able to just go out to eat if people drop by, or if you have guests over, to have dinner with them. And Arnie needs to be able to like sit and have dinner with these guests or with his family, because if he doesn't, it's going to bring shame on his whole family, not just him. So synthesis is just being able to go to the meal, pay attention, and feed himself appropriately. So we actually chose 2 different things to work on in regards to feeding. We did fine motor skills, because he'll have to use chopsticks in that culture, and also attention to be able to sit down at a meal. So in regards to the chopsticks, we chose the framework biomechanical, since we'll be working on his fine motor skills. And the activity, we're going to be hiding objects in therapy. We'll grade up by hiding more objects, and we'll grade down by hiding less. With attention, we did the cognitive retraining, because it focuses a lot on like memory and attention and more like mental than the other models do. So what we want him to do is be able to sit at a table and eat dinner, So the activity that we're doing is puzzles in either less distracting environments or more distracting environments while having him focus on just doing that activity.
All right, and so if you have questions, if anyone just wants to raise your hand or shout them out, whatever you want to do. So what type of government is China? Communist. Good job. Simple cooking in China represents the history of what? Famine. Yep. And do the Chinese believe in sharing patient information with the patient? No. Yay. And then what is the term used to describe qi?
I knew that was going to be the harder one.
Life force.
Okay, so question 5 is a little longer and it's a lot to read, so I'm just going to explain it. So we came across this scenario and we thought it was a really good way to kind of understand the idea of face and the importance of face amongst Chinese culture. So the idea is that you have this group and say we are, say our big class right now is a bunch of foreign exchange students and we are at the university in China and we're attending school there. They have kind of a welcome weekend and they have this day where you have a team of the American students, you have a team of Chinese students, you have a team of the parents, and you have a team of the faculty. So the idea is that you play all these games and these different field games and everything, and the whole way through you're kind of messing with each other. I won, you lost, haha, all day long, and everyone does it. But on the very last game, everyone's tied. And in that last game, you're playing a game where you try and hold a ping pong ball with chopsticks, and you have a relay team and you pass it along. Well, the thought was that the American team would not win because this is not their culture. They don't use chopsticks all the time. Why would they be expected to win? So as the American team took off, they got really, really far ahead and got really close to the finish line. So that's where we stopped. And we decided to ask the question, in order to, if we're discussing the importance of face, should the American team decide to slow down and give the other teams time to catch up but still win? Should they go all the way and earn the respect of their peers and gain face by just taking the win and just being true Americans and winning by a long shot? Or should they slow down and give up the lead so that another team may win and avoid losing face?
A.
How many say A? Let's do it that way. How many say B? Anybody? Do you need time to think about this?
Are we answering this from an American perspective?
What should you do to avoid? So for the importance of face, this entire question is based on the importance of face in Chinese culture. So what should you do if you're on the American team? What should you do? How many think you should just slow down, give the other team times to catch up, but still win? Okay, how many think B? You go all the way and win the respect, and you gain the face by winning. Okay, how many think C, where you slow down and you give another team the chance to win? No. Yeah, no, it's A. So the idea is that they would lose face by you giving it up and giving it to them. They lose your respect, and you completely make them lose face because they become humiliated by the fact that you had to completely stop for them to win. But you don't want to win by a large margin, because if you do that, you're also causes you to lose face. So the idea is that you don't want to win, or you want to win, but you don't want to win by too much. So the actual scenario, the American team did win by a lot, and they were very confused because when they did win by such a large margin, everybody was very quiet. Nobody was messing with them, nobody was doing anything. It was a complete silence among 200 people, and they were really confused. And that's why, because they caused everyone to lose face by doing so. So we passed out the Starbucks, but we don't want to take up any more time. So the idea of that was just a game that we thought everyone could kind of take home and do. And we were going to do it with Starburst because you could eat it later, and we didn't have the time to collect a bunch of rocks. That's the idea. So usually you would use pebbles. That's a traditional Chinese game that Roberta had found out about from a friend, where you put the six Starburst on the table, and someone throws up one of the Starburst as high as you can, whatever you want to do, and then you try and see how many of those pebbles you can pick up, and the time it takes that one to fall back down, and you have to catch that one.
So it's really similar to Jack.
Yeah, it's pretty much Jack, so it's a very simplified version and more what they would play. And it's harder than you think. So you can eat the Starburst if you want, but that was the idea. Yeah.
Good job. I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
So, religion, is primarily the communist country, right? What about tea? Do they drink black tea or green tea, or does it?
It's usually black tea.
It's black tea, really?
Yeah,
It's black tea and it's strong. They don't put anything in it.
Okay. So I was under the impression it was green, but okay.
I was too, but I read.
Who are the minorities that they talk say that they're minority.
Yeah, so like Han is the biggest like Chinese group, and then there's a lot of other just like they're still Chinese, but it's just like they're not the Han people. So like those are the minorities.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of like American society. So, well, not anymore, but it used to be like Hispanics and African Americans were like the minority in like Texas or in the country or whatever. But whoever the minority is within the country, they're not necessarily expected to adhere to that.
Okay. And I think that's pretty generous of the dominant group to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. But there's not that many, like, I think, what was it, 93%, like, there's some, like, 90-something% are Han Chinese, so there's not near the amount of diversity that there is in somewhere like America, so.
And the Ghost Month, is that I guess it's the same as the Hungry Ghost Festival, right?
Yeah, so the Ghost Month, they also, I don't think we mentioned it during the presentation, but they don't believe in burying anyone during that time. So if you die within the Ghost Month, if you are buried, then your spirit gets lost forever. So they keep your body somewhere, and they will keep it for a month, and they will bury you at the end of Ghost Month. So if you die in that month, you get buried a month later.
Do they bury or do they cremate?
A lot of people cremate now because there's just so much population, but if you can afford it, you will bury.
They're not opposed to like either one.
And what's interesting about Hungry Ghost Month, the Ghost Month, is that they believe that the spirits are in the air. So all of the streets and all that, there are all these little altars and this food place in the streets so that the spirits can just eat, help themselves, be happy, and like, so that the spirits don't stay on here. It's pretty interesting too. When you go to places like Malaysia and I guess China, Hong Kong, and all that, you can see this. I think I did a great job for tying it all together. Is it possible for you all to go into that, the occupational synthesis slide?
I should have exited.
Did you close it?
Oh, it's right here. I can open it. Oh, I forgot to log out. That might have been important.
Thank you for that. The last one slide, yeah. So you use cognitive training. Is that considered a frame of reference, or is that considered?
Yeah, we went through SAMES. Was it SAMES that we went through? Because we didn't feel like we had the three approaches that you had given us originally on this PowerPoint. There was biomechanical, and all the ones that were on there didn't seem to really fit the approach that we were taking. So we went to like research other frames of reference, and then that was the one we came across.
And
That
they spoke about cognitive training. I mean, I'm not
Yeah, they focused on,
training as a frame of reference, and that's
yeah, they focused on attention was the big thing that we
Attention and
noticed.
memory was the two big ones that they focused on in that.
okay.
In the frame of reference, yeah.
Yeah, so generally frames of references, the three that I gave you are pretty basic, and then, the theories are what Dr. Smith is presenting in her class. So you chose cognitive retraining to look at attention skills, okay? Okay, let's go to so for fine motor skills, you wanted to use the biomechanical, and that's good. But when you're looking at activity, grading up and grading down and what activities they want to do, hiding 15 objects in Terraputty doesn't quite tell you how you will work towards use of chopsticks.
Okay. So we work more on the grass.
So maybe if you said, okay, this is our starting point. He probably can't pick up objects, so that's why we're starting here.
Okay.
And then gradually we'll grade it out. Gradually we'll help them then look at coordination of fingers. Then that gives me a better idea as to where you're
Where we're starting.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Because as you go on to